Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 2025 The American Cup. The American Cup is one of the strongest tournaments in the United States, featuring a double elimination bracket and 2 time controls. This is a tournament where all of the strongest players in the United States will be participating and fighting for first place. Well, of course, there's the men's section and the women's section, and there's also many stages of this tournament. And right now, we're already into the grand final of this tournament, where in the men's section, which is the section that we're going to be focusing on today in this video, we have Hikaru Nakamura playing against Fabiano Caruana. Now, these two players, they will be fighting for the champion of the 2025 The American Cup Open. And right now, Hikaru actually has been playing really well in this tournament so far. And actually, very interestingly, he had been playing against Fabiano in the winner's bracket finals as well, just a few days ago. And turned out he won with 2.5 points versus Fabi, who is 1.5 points. He won the finals of the winner's bracket and then sent Fabiano directly to the loser's bracket into the final, where Fabi is playing against Nakamura. And these two players, whoever wins, they will now progress into the final stage of this whole tournament, the grand final, and they will be playing against Hikaru Nakamura. Now, basically, this is the result that has been happening, and we see that the grand final, in the loser's bracket final, we have Fabiano 3 points versus Nakamura, who is only having 1 point, and Fabi is now once again back to the winner's bracket, the grand final, and playing against Hikaru, fighting for first place. Now, the situation is still very tense. Yesterday, they have played one classical game, and today, well, the time that I'm recording this video, the second classical game will be played. And if Hikaru draws the game or wins the game, then he will be the champion. But if Fabiano manages to win the game and have a comeback, then these two players, they will be going into the playoffs, where there's like rapid and blitz. And they will decide by playing some faster chess and some faster time controls. Alright, so basically this is what is happening right now in this tournament. But before we take a look at the game today, I'm going to quickly introduce this tournament once again to you guys, because some of you guys might not be familiar with this tournament. So the American Cup is one of the strongest tournaments in the United States, featuring a double elimination bracket and 2 time controls. And it is basically like a knockout kind of format. And we have the players here in the open section, where we have Fabiano Caruana, Wesley So, Leonard Dominguez, Ray Robson, Hikaru Nakamura, Nakamura, Sam Sevian, and Manu Mizra. So these are all super grandmasters in the United States. They are competing. It's really tense, really competitive. And here the broadcast schedule format. Well, the format is pretty interesting. As I've said, it is a double elimination bracket, with each bracket featuring a different time control. Double elimination bracket, classical time control, 90 minutes plus 30 seconds each move. Rapid time control, 15 minutes plus 10 seconds each move. Championship bracket matches, 2 classical games. Elimination bracket matches, 2 rapid games. Grand final reset, 2-game rapid match, followed by playoffs if necessary. So actually the format is really complicated and full of all kinds of time controls. So players, they actually need to be really adaptive in order to play in any kinds of time control at their best performance. And here the prize is the American Cup features a $250,000 prize fund. So also we have a championship bracket bonus. Well, actually, I think Hikaru won this $15,000 because he defeated Fabiano in the finals, and he manages to win the spot in the grand final, as well as this $15,000. Alright, and this is the location, takes place at the St. Louis Chess Club in St. Louis, United States. All right, these are all of the background information about this whole tournament, and now let's jump straight into the game, which is our main focus today in this video. And this is the game that has been played in the grand final between Hikaru Nakamura, who is with the white pieces, against Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces. So both are really strong players, and Hikaru is with the white pieces, and he starts with the move d4, and we have d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, and Hikaru here once again goes for the Catalan opening, which he has been playing quite a lot in this tournament. Also, I think he played a game against Fabiano in the finals in the winner's bracket, and that one actually ended in a really quick draw with only 15 moves. In the game here, Fabi decides to take on c4 and bishop g2, a6. So this is all basically theory. And short castle, knight c6. Black is developing the knight, putting some pressure on the d4 pawn. And here Hikaru develops the knight as well as attacks this c4 pawn. Fabi defends it with b5. Now, for some of you guys who are not familiar with the Catalan, and you might think that this diagonal looks really weak for black, and right now this knight is undefended, being eyed indirectly by this bishop, but actually it is completely fine, because here, let's say you go knight e5, but there's nothing that black needs to worry about. Black can just simply take on e5, and now the point is that if white wants to win material, then white definitely goes for bishop takes a8 to win the rook. But now black can play queen takes d4. Now, even though, at first sight, white might seem to be up material, but then you just realize that black is for, sacrificing a rook, but in the exchange, he has a knight and 2 pawns. So it's actually not that bad for black. And let's say white goes back, but black just simply develops the piece. And with this big black queen side, I think black is doing pretty much fine here. And so that is why in the game, there's nothing to be worried about at this point. And Hikaru in the game played this b3 move. Well, actually, knight e5 is also a move that, the move that I just showed you guys, this is also one of the best options in this position. But after knight e5, the position is going to likely go towards an endgame, where at that point, draws are actually more happens more often. So maybe Hikaru wants to play a little bit longer in the middle game and create more opportunities to win, instead of just going for a really quick draw or something. And in the game, Hikaru decides to go for b3, which is also one of the best moves in this position, and Fabi decides to go c3. In the game, we have knight b1. This is all theory. And now, Fabi plays b4 to defend the pawn. This is also very natural, and in the game, a3 was played. Now, actually, after this a3 move, Fabiano, he spent 5 minutes on this bishop b7 move. So this definitely shows that he is now out of his opening book and just simply, without any preparation anymore. But Hikaru, he is still playing really comfortably and plays this knight e5 move. And this just definitely shows that he is still in his preparation and everything in his comfort zone. So knight e5 is played here, putting some pressure on this diagonal, since now this knight cannot really move, because if you take, then there's bishop takes b7, winning the bishop and attacking this rook. If you go rook b8 here, the bishop just drops back. Not only does white has the bishop pair, but also now black needs to move away this knight, let's say knight g6 here. But then bishop c6 check comes, knight d7 block, but everything is kind of just falling apart. Bishop takes b4, and then queen c2. This pawn is going to fall, and white is going to be winning this. So that is why black cannot really move the c6 knight right now. And in the game, Fabi here decides to go for this really direct move to simplify the position by playing c2. Now, this is a move that just simply says that I want to go into the endgame, and just right now I'm going to trade a couple of pieces. For black, this is not the best move here. If black wants to play on in the middle game, then black can actually play knight d5 here to blockade this diagonal of the bishop. And if white tries to get this knight away with e4, well, the knight can simply just go back to f6 or go to b6 here. At least this knight has accomplished its destiny to try to lure white to push this e4 pawn in order to blockade its bishop's own diagonal. But in the game, Fabi instead decides to go for this really direct, simplifying move, c2. And of course, Hikaru here decides to play bishop takes c6, still playing really fast in his comfort zone. And it's worth noting that you cannot take on c2 here, because then there's knight takes d4, attacking the queen, and the queen has to move. Queen c4, and then after bishop takes g2, king takes g2, queen d5, queen takes d5, knight takes d5. This is basically all fours. But right now, once the queens are traded off the board, black is now up a very healthy pawn. I know it happens a lot in the Catalan where white just simply sacrifices the pawn, but black has too many weaknesses and too slow in development. But right now, the queens are off the board, and it's not that easy for white to get that much of compensation. And most likely, black is going to win here with a pawn up. So in the game, of course, Hikaru knows that he cannot allow the queens to get off the board right now, and instead he plays bishop takes c6 first with check, bishop takes c6, and here queen takes c2. Basically, there's no other options for white, so you need to take on c2, and here after bishop e4, attacking the queen, here we have queen b2, which is also a very logical square for the queen to go to, bishop b7 back, and a takes b4. Bishop takes b4 and bishop d2, offering a bishop trade. At least white's idea here is to get rid of black's bishop pair because, bishop pairs are always like an advantage, especially in open positions, as like in this position right now. Bishop d2 was played, and we have c5 in the game. Actually, a really nice move by Fabiano, because he is not going for any passive like retreating moves like bishop e7, because that will just simply make white's position too comfortable, and white can just simply play knight a3, knight c4, and if black wants to trade it off, then black will have to waste another move by playing this bishop, and it's definitely unnecessary for black, and black is going to be much worse. So that is why in the game, c5 was instead played by Fabi, a really accurate move, and here Hikaru decides to play knight d3. Although this is not the best move here, the best option for white is to go rook c1 here to swing all the pieces to the queen side and put some pressure on the c5 pawn. But in the game, knight d3 is also a move that is kind of reasonable. And in the game, Fabi decides to play queen d5 to have some really cheeky threats here on this diagonal by threatening mate in 1 on both of these squares. And here, Hikaru just simply blockades with f3, and there are no more threats like this. Bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, queen takes d4, forcing a trade of queens. But now after c takes d4, we reach a position where now the queens are finally off the board. And at this point, black is definitely up a pawn, that's for sure. But we see that, first of all, black's king is still in the center of the board, and second of all, this a6 pawn is a really weak pawn, as well as this d4 pawn. Rook a4 is a move that can be played anytime by white, and also, black's light square bishop is a bishop that is kind of misplaced, because just after a couple of moves, white will be able to double the rooks on the a file to put some pressure on the a6 pawn, limiting black's bishop's activity. So it's not that easy for black to play, and white has enough compensation for the sacrificed pawn. In the game here, Hikaru decides to play rook c1 to swing the rook to the open file here, and Fabi decides to go short castle. In the game, rook a4 was played, and here rook f d8, defending the pawn, and we have rook c7 here, rook d7 offering a rook trade, rook takes d7. This is a move that actually Hikaru, even in his own video, he said that he is not really a fan of this rook takes d7 move by himself. Instead, he says, and actually here, even the computer suggests that it is better for white to go rook ac4 here, because you want to wait for black to trade instead of you're trading yourself. Because here, if you take, then after rook c7, white is up a tempo, and right now attacking the bishop, it's not that easy for black to react. And if black doesn't do anything, and let's say black waits here and attacks the rook on c4, well, there's just rook c8 check here. And of course, definitely you cannot take, and you have to play rook d8, and after takes, white can now take this d4 pawn. At least this position is much more comfortable for white to play. But in the game, however, Hikaru, with 40 minutes still left on the clock, decides to only think about 2 minutes and played rook d7. And also, let's focus on this time difference right now on the board. Hikaru still has 38 minutes and Fabi only has 13 minutes left on the clock. And this definitely shows that in the opening, Fabiano spent a little bit too much time. And right now we're into the end game. Sometimes at very critical moments, it could be really difficult for black to play. But right now, the position is still pretty easy. Knight d7, rook takes d4. Hikaru, first of all, wins the pawn back, and it's a really nice position. In the game, bishop c6 was played, defending the knight, knight c4, a5, pushing the pawn. But already, a5 is not a mistake or anything. It's a really normal move. But in the game, it's kind of the wrong direction. Instead, what black should have done here to make a very easy draw is just simply to walk this king out towards the center, control some of the very important squares, and it's much easier to draw that way. But in the game, a5 was played instead, and this definitely gives white some chances in the future. And here, king f2 first, going up with the king. This is a really nice idea by Hikaru. King f8, rook d6, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes to b5 here, and knight a3 was played. Now, basically, black is forced to trade a pair of minor pieces. Bishop takes d3 here, and white has two options, to take this knight or take this bishop. And obviously, you have to take both pieces with the rook, because if you take the bishop with the pawn, then you damage your own pawn structure, and it's quite unnecessary. And if you take the bishop, then it's knight versus knight, and it's kind of easier for black to defend this way, because this knight can, go to c5, go to b6 to create more problems for white. So it's better to let black keep the bishop on the board instead of the knight. And here in the game, Hikaru made the correct decision and took the knight on d7. Now it is a knight versus bishop endgame, and with the computer still suggests that this is a dead draw. But in human eyes, first of all, black is down a lot of time. Second of all, this bishop has nowhere good to go. It can only defend. And here, probably bishop g6 is also a move that is possible, but wasn't played in the game. It does gain more control of the light squares. But in the game, however, Fabiano instead decides to go bishop a6 back. Still, it's a completely drawish position, but Hikaru is trying to give his opponent some challenges, to challenge his opponent, and trying to lure his opponent to get himself into positions where it's quite easy for him to make mistakes. First of all, rook d6 was played, and here already Fabiano is going for the wrong direction. In the game, he played king e7. At first sight, this just seems like a move that is so normal. You're going up your king towards the center, following the endgame rules, and you're also attacking the rook. But this is just simply a mistake, because in the game, first of all, there's rook c6 to run away, to ignore everything, and here king f6 was played. And just to show you guys what's the best move here. The best move is actually either to go king e8, probably king e8 is slightly better, but you can also go bishop b7. King e8, and now let's say the king goes up to e3. Well, black's idea here is actually to go rook b8. Because now there's rook b3 coming, so probably white can instead play king e1 to go over this way. But now let's say bishop b7 or something, and if white decides to jump in with knight b5 here, then bishop c8. And knight c7 doesn't work because there's king e7 now. So actually, what I'm trying to show is that if you play king e7 immediately as played in the game, then it will give white the chance to have checks on the 7th rank directly. But if you go king e8, then, wait a second. Here, if you go king e8, it kind of if white plays rook c6 here, then after bishop b7, black is now able to play bishop b7 because the king is not on e7, because at that point there's going to be rook c7 to, win the bishop. Here, if you go here and then bishop b7, white will be able to fork the bishop and the king. So here, That is the main difference between king e8 and king e7, because king e8 can ignore a lot of threats by white on the 7th rank. But it's just a slight difference, and it's not that easy to decipher. And in the game here, Fabi instead played king e7, which looks really normal, but now after rook c6, king f6 was played in the game, because if you play king d7, like trying to keep on tickling this rook, the rook now goes back to c5, and suddenly attacking this pawn, black needs to play something like bishop b7 to defend this pawn by opening up the file of the rook. But now there's knight c4, and suddenly white is not only attacking the a5 pawn, but also threatening to go knight b6, forking the rook and the king, and black is in huge trouble here. So that is why in the game king d7 was not played, but instead played king f6. And here rook c5 was played, attacking the a5 pawn, and bishop b7, opening up the file for the rook to defend the pawn. And in the game here, actually, white is close to winning if white had played this knight c4 move. But Hikaru maybe thought that he wasn't sure what will happen, especially after a4 here, and then b4, like, maybe not b4, but let's say knight b6 or something. Yeah, like knight b6 attacking the rook, rook a6 or something, and then knight takes a4, like bishop d5 or something. Maybe he is not sure if this is a very clear win or not, because it's not that easy for white to push this pawn. Or maybe he also thought about like bishop d5 here, because you can take on a5, and then after rook b8, like tickling this pawn over here, rook a3. Maybe it's not that clear for Hikaru how to win at this point, even though he is up a pawn. But after rook b4 or something, rook c3, like 5 pawns versus 4 pawns, it's still pretty tricky and not that easy to like calculate so much far ahead. So Hikaru thought that, okay, this is something that I'm not sure about, then instead I'm going to go for something that I'm more certain that I won't be like making an easy draw or something, and he played e4. Now, chess.com gave it a question mark, like making it like a mistake. Like chess.com says it's a mistake, but I think it's also a move that is quite reasonable, because you're like trying to prevent bishop d5 and everything. And this definitely shows that Hikaru knows that black's idea is to go bishop d5, so he just prevents it. So there's nothing wrong with it. And in the game, Fabi plays a4, trying to exchange the pawns on the queen side and making all of the pawns on the same side, which at that point will be a very easy draw to make. So he ignores this trade and pushes the pawn, and then rook d8, trying to slide into the white's territory, and that is why Hikaru plays king e2, g5 was played, and rook c4. Now already there's a couple of few maneuvers here by both sides, h5, and here Hikaru plays b5, attacking this a4 pawn, and now black needs to go back. Well, actually, black needs to go back to a8, but in the game, Fabiano didn't play it. Maybe he was afraid of rook c7, and then he will be too passive. It's really hard for him to defend. But in the game, instead, he played g4, which is the other idea, trying to open up or like trying to break through on the king side to create some counterplay. But right now, there's f4. Hikaru just simply ignores everything and is still threatening to take on a4. e5 was played, f5. Well, actually, for Hikaru, he can just simply take, and after king e5, play king e3 to defend this e4 pawn, and then black now needs to defend it, and then rook c7, like, oops, not that, like here, let's say rook c8, and because if you take, there's rook c3, so let's say rook e7, king f6, rook takes b7, or something, king d4, let's say, rook takes a3, rook a7. I mean, white is gonna, like, white is not up a pawn, but white does have much more active rook, the king, and maybe it's still possible for white to win, but it's going to likely end in a draw. And that is probably what Hikaru thought about. Again, it's an unclear future if he takes on e5, so instead he decides to close up the center by playing f5. At least there's no risks here. And then the game h4 was played, but actually already at this point, with accurate play, this is going to be a dead draw. But here, Fabiano only has 2 minutes left on the clock. We have rook a4 and a couple of exchanges. Black decides to slide in on the king side, king d1, rook h1, king c2. But sometimes, when you're under time pressure, you make mistakes, sometimes even blunders, and you just throw away a position that you've been holding so well in the opening, in the middle game, but you just made a final mistake at the end. And here, Fabi decides to play rook e1, which is just simply a blunder. But I mean, this is a position where it's actually kind of unclear and really unbalanced, because right now white is up a pawn, but black here can actually play rook g1 to win this pawn back. And let's say if white wants to defend it, well, actually right now you lose the e4 pawn. So white's best try is actually to go knight d2 here, because if you take on g3 now, there's rook a7, but instead you can play this really nice move rook g2 and threatening to take on e4 if white man tries to move away with the rook. So here, let's say rook c4 or something, but now black can just simply wake back and forth and kind of making a fortress. And if white pushes the pawn, then, still bishop b7 is possible, because anytime white moves the rook away, there is bishop e4. And this is just like a fortress where white is unable to break, but with only 39 seconds left on the clock for Fabiano, he didn't see this idea and instead played rook e1, trying to go for this e4 pawn immediately. But now, knight c3 was played, Hikaru jumps in with the knight, defends the e4 pawn, and here after rook e3, now Fabiano is trying to go for this g3 pawn, but it's one move too late. And here, after a couple of calculations of variations here, Hikaru decides to go for this final blow, knight d5, and kind of forcing a trade of the minor pieces, because now after bishop takes d5, e takes d5, white is up a pawn, and here rook takes g3 was played, but it doesn't really work. And here the best try for black is actually trying to get this king back, but still this is losing b6, rook e2, king c3, like king d6, this doesn't really work, rook b4, white is up a pawn, and it's unstoppable. And let's see how this game finished. In the game, Fabiano plays rook takes g3, his final trying to take this pawn and trying to promote the g-pawn, but simply Hikaru just ignores it and pushes the b-pawn, rook g2 check, but the king simply goes up, rook g3 check, and after king c4 here, Fabiano resigned this game because he is running out of checks and b7, b8 is unstoppable. If you go for rook g1 here, then b7, and if you go rook b1, white can just simply block with rook b4 and promote on the very next move. And here with that, Hikaru won his first classical game in the grand final of the 2025 The American Cup. And today, the time I'm recording this video, maybe a few hours later, the second classical game will begin. And of course, Fabiano has a lot of pressure because he is in a must-win situation. And only if he wins, then he will have the chance to play against Hikaru in the playoffs, like in the faster time controls. And only with that he might have some chances to win this whole tournament. And for Hikaru, all he needs is a draw, so definitely the situation is much better for him. But still, this last classical game is really important for both sides, and no one should, be too comfortable. They should still focus a lot and play their best chess. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this game, and Hikaru played really well. Fabiano, under time pressure at the very last moment, made a blunder and lost it, but still, he has some chances to win. This very next classical game is we're all looking forward to it. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this game as well as this video. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!